This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we talk to industry experts about debt, money, and personal finance. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
What's it like to be approaching retirement and get downsized? What happens if you get downsized and get a buyout and don't leave enough money aside to pay the taxes owing on the buyout? What's it like to be a senior trying to help your adult children? What happens if you help your children and that puts you in financial trouble? We're going to answer those questions and more on today's edition of Debt Free in 30. So let's get started and meet my guest. Who are you and what do you do?
I'm Vanessa Benedict, and I'm a wealth advisor with National Bank Financial, and I've been doing this for 20 years, and my job is to do estate planning, financial planning, investment portfolios, and just overall seeing from start to beginning, your financial plans. So
20 years. Okay. So let's get some basic definitions out of the way here. So you said you're what do you call yourself? A wealth
advisor.
A wealth advisor. So I know when I go to the bank and I, deposit a $10 check, the teller says, oh, well, you need to get an RSP or something. So
exactly.
What is the difference between, and you work for a bank.
Yes.
What is the difference between a wealth advisor and whatever all the other things I could possibly be getting, the teller at the bank giving me advice or whatever? Is there a difference?
So the financial advisor at the bank level is a great place to start if you're in your early 20s or just you're making your first job and you need to start putting money away. So it's a perfect starting. So think of it as you're in public school and you have your public school teacher and you're growing and you're kind of accumulating kind of assets. You got your mortgages and everything is there in your own bank. And you get to a certain stage in your life that you want to then progress to the next level. So you have accumulated enough funds there that you need. There's a possibility of insurance or financial planning, estate planning, investment. So you're now graduated to like the high school, university level, and you need more expertise, more specialists. And that's where the wealth management comes. Because behind me, not only do I have the expertise of 20 years of investments, I also have a team of experts behind me, estate planners, tax planners. So you're getting that whole overall big picture scenario to look after your financial needs. So you don't have to go from, different areas to get the one thing done.
So it's kind of like the difference between a general practitioner doctor
Yes.
and a fancy specialist. So
exactly.
Okay. So that makes sense. And, we're not going to talk today about how to invest millions of dollars because we're more focused on the debt side. So I want to ask you about that. And I know that in your practice, obviously you end up dealing with a lot of seniors. So we're going to talk a bit about them today as well. But before we get to that, I did a show, I think it was back in December with Georgia Graham, who's works with West in Windsor. And she told me that women are disadvantaged when it comes to dealing with people like you, wealth management people, financial professionals in general. And I said, well, I'm a man, so I don't really understand what you're talking about, but is that really true? And she said, well, yeah, if, you go to a bank, a husband and a wife, the wealth management person, someone like you, is more likely to address their comments to the men as opposed to the women. And I said, okay, I get it. Men are sexist. And she said, well, no, it's both. I mean, even the female wealth management people tend to focus more on the male on the assumption that he's the one making the decision. What do you think of that? Is that actually true? Is that actually a bias or do banks treat men and women exactly equally?
No, I have to agree with her in some regard there. From the bank level that, the beginning stages of investing, at the bank level, 90% of the staff is women. The financial advisors there are women. But then on the flip side, the wealth management side only has 20% women. Those are the women, the people you see on BNN that give all the advice and the markets and things like that. You generally see men there. And I think the way the industry has been focused on men. And she's right. Both women and females and males kind of look at males that way. And I think for myself, being in this industry, I focus primarily on women for that very reason, because there's only 20% of me out there in the wealth management arm. So I can see why there is a bias. So women out there should be looking for women like myself when you have a certain amount of money, so you don't get yourself into trouble if they don't understand what you're doing, right? So like you just said, you don't understand because you're a man, right? But for me, I can completely understand where, Georgia was coming from, because it's true. When you go into a bank branch and they're focused on that and everybody focuses on the males, well, women now today are the ones with the money. So the shift has to switch there. But where do we begin when wealth management only has 20% women?
Yeah, and I guess
right?
the answer is what you just said. Well, if I'm a customer,
yes,
I get to pick who I'm dealing with. So if whether I'm a man or a woman, if I'm not satisfied with the person I'm dealing with, well, get somebody different.
Exactly.
And you can certainly switch. So, okay, well, that was kind of a tangent, but I wanted to get your opinion on it while I was thinking about it. So let's get back to the point you just made about dealing with people in trouble and things like that, because that's where I want to go with this. So I want to throw some numbers at you to start and just kind of get your sense of whether this makes sense from what you see in your world as well. So in our Joe Debtor report, which we released at the end of March, where we profile people who go bankrupt or file a consumer proposal, we reported that 12% of our clients are now 60 years of age or older. 2 years ago, it was only 10%. 4 years ago, it was 8%. So pretty obviously the number of seniors who are getting into financial trouble is growing. The rate of insolvency amongst seniors is going up, but that's not the most scary part. They've got the highest unsecured debt of all age groups, over $64,000. They've got the highest debt to income ratio of all age groups, about 251%. They have the most owing on credit cards of all age groups. And I think a lot of that's because they've been alive for longer and have been able to build up a lot of debt. Does any of that surprise you?
No, not at all. Like I've had people come see me and they want a holistic picture of investments, and I'm surprised when they're in their 60s how much mortgage they have. Like back in the day, you would quickly pay off all your mortgages and pay off all your debt quickly. And I think because low interest rates play a part in that, because when you go in there, people say, well, why should we pay off our debt when we could invest it somewhere else? And the problem is that...
And this is very common, what you're talking about.
It's becoming very common. And I'm always shocked when I see a 55-year-old or 60-year-old come giving me all their numbers, and I see that they have a huge mortgage. Or they're upsizing to a bigger house. It's usually the other way around, right? And then all of a sudden they're remortgaging to get a bigger house.
But is this a problem? I mean, houses always go up in value and always have, and they'll be worth billions of dollars tomorrow. So shouldn't we all be borrowing as much as we possibly can and levering ourselves to the
back
hilt?
in the 90s, though, the housing market crashed.
Mm-hmm.
And
I remember.
So like early 90s. So what happened? That happens again. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden you've borrowed money. You think your house is going up in price. And then all of a sudden, inversely, the interest rates go up, and inversely, the price of the houses go down. Where are you going to get the equity to live?
You're toast.
Right?
Why do you think seniors get into trouble then? Because the way you described it is exactly the way it should be. I mean, I work my entire life so that by the time I retire, I've paid off my mortgage, I've got no debt, I got money in RSPs and savings and whatnot. So why is it that for a certain segment of the population, that's just not the case?
Well, if you look at the segment of the population, you said between 55 and 65. I think that's what you said just now.
Yeah, I mean, I define seniors as sort of 60 and over, but yeah, that's the same ballpark you're talking about. But I think of
seniors in two groups, right? The 55 to 70-year-old and 70 to the 100.
Okay.
So think of the people from 70 to 100, which would be these people's parents. Generally, the 70 to the 100 years old, they generally are the ones who went through the Depression, went through the war. So they were diligent and frugal in what they saved their money. They're the ones that have lots of money saved, but they didn't spend a lot. Right? When you remember they talk about Christmas, all they got was an orange and they barely got anything. So then the next generation, which is the 50 to 60-year-olds of the kids of these parents, are thinking, well, we lived so frugally because of our parents. We didn't get all those things. They now feel like they should be going on travels and renovating their kitchens, getting bigger houses. Like they work, they feel like that. And meanwhile, their parents who are in their 90s are flabbergasted that these people are spending this kind of money.
Yeah.
They would never have spent this money.
So a lot of it is just their perceptions and what they think they're potentially, entitled to. So,
exactly.
Now I want to talk about something specific. We're recording this here in Oshawa today in my office, and you operate in this community as well. A few years ago, a lot of longtime employees at GM got downsized. They got their buyout. And from what I understand, a bunch of them ended up in a lot worse shape, even though they got a chunk of money. They ended up getting hit with taxes and things like that. Did you see that happening?
Well, of course. So when somebody comes to make that decision to commute, there's so many factors you have to look at. One.
So you said commute. So what you're talking
taking
about?
the lump sum payment of their pension.
And you can put it into
a LIRA or invest it. So
LIRA being a locked-in retirement account.
Exactly.
So you can, if you do that, you don't get whacked with the tax.
Well, no. So what happens is if you take a commuted pension out, part of it is part of the law is you have to put it into a locked-in retirement account, and then part of it is taxable because the way the numbers are calculated from your pension, part of it goes into your bank account. A big chunk goes into your bank account, almost $200,000. So if you don't set aside money, this is not money to go buy boats and put a down payment on a cottage. And I think that's what people did. They got excited. It was like they won the lottery. And if you never managed money your whole life, all you had was a pension, you never invested, you never saved, and you get this big lump sum of money, and you didn't go to a proper person to advise you, you need to, this is your locked in money. This is all you're going to get from a pension plan. And this has got to last you from 55 to 100 if you never get another job. And then you have all this debt on top of it. Where are you going to pay that? Is this the right choice to take to accumulate value? And then on top of that, that big 200,000 is taxable, and you need to set that money aside. So if no one sees the proper advice while doing this, and they think, oh my gosh, I'm getting 700,000, and 300 goes into a locked in, and then 400 comes out into taxable money, and I buy all this stuff, and the government sends me a letter saying I owe 100,000 in taxes. Well, where are they going to get this money?
Yeah, I've already spent it. So if anyone does get downsized and is getting a big package, they should definitely be talking to someone who knows
exactly
a bit about what has to happen. Yeah, I mean, when we did our study, 47% of seniors have tax debt when they file. And of those people who had the tax debt, they owed on average $27,000 in tax debt. So, which was about a third of their total unsecured debt. So it's a significant point. So, and I guess the buyout is one obvious example, but just cashing out an RSP can do it too.
Yes.
Do you see that a lot where people have cashed in an RSP and then don't realize there's implications to that?
Well, seniors at a certain age, they get their CPP, their old age, and some of them, and that's all taxable money, right? So then they have like their RIFs and their RSPs and all these things, and they're not seeking the right counsel, like whether it's myself or a tax specialist, an accountant. They need to see what they can take out and how much money they need to withhold, but no one does that because, you generally get the 10%, like the government doesn't know how much you're getting from all these other sources.
Right.
So if you take out your CPP in old age, they're just going to withhold 10% because you're in the lowest tax bracket. But if you're withdrawing from everywhere else and the other places think you're in the lowest tax bracket, but accumulative together, you're becoming the highest tax bracket, that's when they don't realize.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem.
Right?
So each person thinks you're in the 10% tax bracket.
Exactly.
They take off 10%, but you add your CPP and your OAS and then whatever you got from your RSP cashed in. Now you're in the 30 or 40% bracket. Nobody took enough tax off. And that's a very common thing we see, particularly in the first year of retirement, because maybe I worked until June at my job.
Right.
And then in July or August, I started getting a pension. I maybe cashed in some other investments. When you add the two of them together, I'm really toast. So again, I think your advice is the obvious one. Talk to someone who actually knows about this before you start spending all that money because there may be taxes owing. I want to ask you about another problem that I see quite a bit, and I want to get your thoughts on this because maybe you disagree or agree with my thoughts on it. My opinion is you shouldn't be helping your adult children.
Oh, I agree 100%.
Okay, good. Perfect. We're on the same page here then. So, because I'm being overly dramatic and very simplistic about it because if my adult child has some very serious medical issue and needs $50 to get life-saving serum, then I'm going to get it for them,
right,
obviously.
Of course.
But I'm talking more about in this day and age where I'll cash in some of my pension and get $100,000 so I can give it to my kid for a down payment on a house.
Right.
I'm not a big fan of that. What do you think?
Well, I actually had a client come in last week.
Tell us their name and social insurance. No, you can't do that. So tell us what happened.
So a client comes in, the husband calls me up and says, you need to meet with us. And I said, okay, fine. And so we were talking and going through their whole thing. And he says, what do you think about us giving our son, $200,000 for a condo? And I am looking at them and I said, that's a terrible idea. and the mother gets upset and she's, and I can understand. I'm a mom. I have 2 little kids and I get you want to help your kids, right? You really, and I agree with you. If it's in dire straits, I would help them, but to buy a condo. So I said, okay, well, how much does your son make? Well, he makes $60,000. Well, what does he pay right now? And she goes, well, he has a basement apartment. He pays $500 a month. And I said, does he save anything? And she goes, no. I said, so you give $200,000 for this down payment of a condo. Who's going to pay for the mortgage now? If you guarantee it, you're on the hook. What about maintenance costs? What about hydro? What about water? What about the property tax? What about all these other incidentals that he can't even barely do by paying rent to $500 a month? So who's going to pay for all that? Great, you bought him a place to live, but to run a household takes more than the down payment, right? So to me, and people don't think of the big picture. They're thinking, oh, I'm giving this. I feel so bad. Housing prices are $800,000. Well, you know what? That's great. Maybe you have to rent a couple years. Maybe your kids, think about your life. Think about your parents that are now 90. Did they give you $200,000? I don't think so.
They did not. No.
They did not give you. How much did you get for an inheritance, right? And who's going to look after you after you give this $200,000 to your kid, and all of a sudden you are in dire straits, and you need to go, your husband goes and gets a stroke and you have to put him in a retirement home. Who's going to pay for that? That kid that you gave $200,000, and now you have your house, and now you're forced to do something now. So what happens? You got to look at the bigger picture. And you have to understand, when people are looking for advice, you have to be careful. Of course, if you're going into somewhere or like a mortgage specialist or something, of course they want you to get that because they're going to get something from it. Right? Yep. Is it the right advice to do that?
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, we're all biased.
Yeah, of course.
I want people to do a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy. You want them to invest money. The mortgage broker wants them to get a mortgage.
Exactly.
But I think you hit on the key point there, which is if I give my adult child $200,000 in your example, how will that impact me? And I guess if I have $10 million in the bank, well, it won't impact me at all. Fine. I guess, it would be nice if the kid, like you said, lived on their own 2 feet kind of a thing, but it's not really going to impact me that much. It would be like me giving my son $20. Well, okay, it's not a big deal. But I assume in the case of the client you're talking about, $200,000 was real money. Yes. It was not an insignificant amount.
That's right.
And you're right. You got to think ahead a few years. So I have to go into a retirement home or a assisted living facility. What does that cost a month? A few $1,000s, I assume.
Right.
And if my CPP and OAS is $1,000 a month.
Right. Where are you going to get the rest of the money?
Where are you going to get the rest of the money? So that's the biggest issue, I guess, with helping adult children then.
Right. And but going back to even the one that you said about the $10 million, what are you teaching your kid? Mm-hmm. You give him $200,000 and something happens to you and you have an estate that's going to go to charities and all these things and you're not giving the full $10 million to this kid. Mm-hmm. Well, how is he going to survive? Or she's going to survive? Right?
Yeah.
At the bottom of the day. $200,000 is not that much if you're looking at the bigger picture for 30 years living.
Right.
Right?
And so what did your clients decide to do?
Well, just told him to start saving and
So you were able to talk them out of...
because I said
this isn't the right thing for you.
No, and I told them the pros and cons. I did. I graduated Queens with math and science. So I'm about the practicality of things. I get the emotion, right? Like I said, I'm a mom. I get that, right? Mm-hmm. But the problem, I have to look at practical numbers. So what I did was did a spreadsheet. What happens if we take 200,000 and the markets take a dive and things go the opposite, worst case scenario, right? And what is that going to look like in 20 years? And how is that going to impact you versus, all of a sudden he needs more money and needs more money because it just starts with 200,000, but he's got to maintain it. So let's add all that up that he needs to run that place.
Yeah.
And where is he going to get that money if he can't even save money from his $60,000 job?
Well, and so I always like to end the show with practical advice. So I think you've just given us a very good piece of practical advice, which is crunch the numbers.
Yes, of course. Look at the bigger picture and know somebody who knows their numbers.
And so in this example, so the kid's buying a condo for, was it a $200,000 condo or was that the down payment?
Right?
Yeah.
Well, think of housing, right?
Yeah, I know. There's no such thing as a $200,000 condo anymore. So the condo is going to cost, I don't know, let's say $500,000.
Right.
I don't know what the numbers were. So you give him the $200,000, but he's still got a mortgage payment of $300,000 on $300,000. He's got the condo fees, the hydro, the whatever. Right. So it's still going to cost him what, $2 or $3 grand a month for the condo. And he's been used to paying $500 a month for his basement apartment.
Yeah, exactly.
And he hasn't been able to save any money.
Exactly.
So that means he's breaking even every month, but now his expenses are going to go up by a couple of $1,000 a month.
Exactly.
There's your math problem.
Exactly. And a potential client for you.
Yeah. Okay. Right? Well, so why are you talking out of it?
Right?
But no, I totally agree with you. Then that's the mindset you got to have. And so when you were able to explain it to the parents that way, they were able to see that they weren't helping their son really. No,
not at all.
Because all he was going to do is have much higher expenses as a result, and they were potentially hurting themselves.
Exactly.
So we're going to come back to the practical advice. One more thing I want to ask you about, because this is, again, blows me away. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but of our clients who are seniors, so again, I'm defining that as 60 years of age or over,
right.
11% of them have payday loans when they file a bankruptcy or proposal with us. And the debt level they owe on those payday loans is about $3,600. So they've got 3 or 4 of them, and they're, owing $1,000 on each of them, payday loans and short-term loans. And they get them because their, cash flow just isn't what it needs to be. And the payday loan companies are more than happy to loan to someone who has a fixed income. Oh, you get a pension from there. You get CPP, OAS.
Right.
Well, we assume you'll be able to pay us back. Do you ever see clients get into payday loan trouble?
Not mine per se, but I can understand why they would get into it. Especially, you have to think about, you said 60 and above. Those are the generation of people that would have saw interest rates in their 15, 20% GICs. So when you get to 60 years old, you're not coming to invest in what I do because you don't understand it. You're afraid of it. All you think about is, I'm going to invest in stocks and bonds and all these things. And all of a sudden, I don't understand that. I hear you're going to lose money. But when you need 6% to live off of and you only get 1% off a GIC, that's not enough to live off of. So what's happening? These people are depleting their savings down so quickly that I can see why they have to go to these payday loans for the next paycheck to come in, right? So if you were used to you saved up in the Canada Savings Bonds were 20% at one time, and that generation would have saw that. Mm-hmm. And now you're at an industry, interest rates for 1% you can get on a GIC. Well, how are you going to live off of that? So they don't understand, even though it's safe and comfortable there, you're still depleting the extra 5% principal. You're not getting that back. Even though it seemed to be safe, if you take an extra 5%, it's gone.
Yep.
Right? So then you have to go resort to, oh my gosh, I'm depleting my savings so quickly. I got to go to these loans and figure out how I'm going to do that. And because you have a fixed paycheck, the bank isn't going to give you a line of credit because you don't have any working income anymore.
Yeah, the banks are less likely to lend to you than the higher interest rate type lenders are.
So unfortunately, they prey on that because they rather pay the extra 20, 15, 10, I don't know how much the interest rate on those payday loans
468%,
right?
If you look at it on a yearly basis.
So
it's huge.
It's huge, right? But they rather do that than take a risk in the markets because they don't understand enough, right?
And so what am I supposed to do as a senior? So let's assume I'm 70 years old.
Right.
And some days I feel like it. And I've been very prudent my whole life. I've saved money. I don't have any debt, but I'm also a risk averse person.
Yes.
If it was 30 years ago, I could stick it in GICs and earn my 10% and live off that. But now I put it in GICs and I'm lucky to get 1%.
Right.
So I've got to have millions of dollars just to make ends meet. What is someone supposed to do? What kind of advice do you give that kind of person?
Well, go and see somebody that knows numbers, shows you everything, the pros and cons. There is downside to be investing into the markets, of course, right? But understand that if you get 1% with no risk involved, if you were to get an income of 6%, of course there's going to be risk involved, but understand that. And understand there's also fees to come to somebody like myself. Understand how that is. So before you do anything, and if you don't understand enough, bring somebody that understands you to interview these people. Right? Because I understand that you might not understand enough. Bring somebody that is knowledgeable, that you trust, to come to the meeting with you. And that may help you.
So it's all about knowledge is what it comes down to, and deciding what the appropriate level of risk is. If you want to take zero risk, well, then the returns will be commensurate with that.
Exactly.
And I'm certainly not going to give out investment advice on this show. That's certainly not my purview. But I like your idea. Bring someone with you then.
That's right.
Who can help you interpret what's being said and help you along. So what other practical advice then would you give people who are, and let's stick with the 50 and over crowd, 60 and over crowd kind of a thing. So number one would be, doing your research, getting as much knowledge as you can. What other types of things should our listeners be focusing on? For people that are in trouble, like sticking to the show here, there's people who are in trouble, who already got themselves into trouble, and they're sitting there at home trying to figure what to do. Like, I advise them to come see, you guys and get advice. It might not be as bad as they think. Get everything straightened out. They might be sitting on a house that they could sell and do something with, and then maybe the next step is to sell it and maybe do
something else with it rather than sitting and living in an asset, having all this debt, paying all this interest rate to everybody else. Maybe they can come and consolidate and get everything organized first, and maybe get a plan starting with you guys first, and then maybe the next step is to come see somebody like me, right? Once everything is straightened out. You know what I mean?
And I think that's a good logical progression. And you're right. If I've got some equity in my house, well, maybe now's the time to either refinance or sell the house and cash that in and pay off the debts. A lot of people don't realize that if they go bankrupt, in most cases, they don't lose their RSP.
That's right.
So I have people who come in and say, okay, I owe, $20,000 on my credit card. I've got $40,000 in my RSP. Okay, well, you can, it may be a perfectly good idea to cash in the RSP, but you're going to pay a big chunk of that in taxes.
That's right.
There'll be nothing left. Are you better off considering either a proposal or a bankruptcy obviously there would be other factors involved in what's your income and what are your other assets. I'm certainly not saying everyone should be just, going bankrupt.
No, of course, case by case.
Yeah, every case is different, but the rule in Canada is if you haven't contributed anything to the only thing you lose in a bankruptcy is the money you've put in your RSP in the last 12 months.
Right.
So if it's the payout you got 5 years ago and it's still sitting in your RSP, you don't lose that if you go bankrupt or do a proposal. So I like that thought process. Figure out if there are assets that you've got that can be used to sell and pay off the debts. What about the income and expense side of things then? Do you see a lot of people who have room in their budget to be cutting expenses and free up cash that way?
Of course they can, right?
What are common things that you look at?
Clothes, name brand items. Like, people didn't care for name brands as much as they do cars. More people are car debt. Like, they always have to have a new car all the time. Buying their kids stuff. I don't think the kids need to be dressed to the nines in name brand items, right? I think everybody has this stigma making themselves, their whole family, like, to keep up with the Joneses, right?
Yep.
Going on trips. Do you need to go on 4 cruises a year and put them all on your credit card? Like, little
let me
things
think.
like,
let me think.
right?
No, the answer is no. Yeah, I've never gone on a cruise in my life, so I'm the wrong person to answer that question. But
like little things like that, right? And people aren't to blame. It's also all the institutions that give credit cards out, and you don't even have to have income to get a credit card. All you do is you get the mail said you're been approved for $5,000. And even it's everybody. It's not just seniors. It's everybody falls into that problem, right?
Yep. And so, I think that's a great way to end it. That you got to look at the asset side of it to free stuff up there, but you got to look at the expenses too, because you can cash in all your assets. If you're still spending more each month than you bring in, then you've got a problem.
Exactly.
So, are there any final tips or thoughts you want to leave our listeners with today?
Well, do your due diligence. Find there's experts out there. Do your research. Understand everything about it. That's why we're the experts, right? You're coming to us for expert advice. Have your questions ready. Make sure you know ins and outs. Know everything before you do anything. I think don't do the first thing. Don't make decisions on fear.
Yeah, the doing nothing sometimes is the correct answer while you research your options.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. Vanessa, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. That was my conversation with Vanessa Benedict. Vanessa works in the wealth management group at a major bank. I don't know if we mentioned the name of the bank or not, but you can figure it out, because what we're going to do is put links on our show notes. She helps spend a lot of time with seniors managing their money as well. And I think we had a lot of practical tips today about how to manage money, and specifically what to do if you've got more debt than you can handle. Do your best to eliminate all your debt before retirement. When you retire, your income is going to drop, so you don't want to be carrying any additional debt, because the debt service costs when you're on a fixed income are not a good thing. And as Vanessa said, if you have debt, make a plan to pay it off. Talk to the experts. Obviously, start with the highest interest rate debts, and then deal with your revolving or callable debts next. And we both agree, be very careful helping adult children. It's great to want to help. We understand once a parent, always a parent, but you don't want to put yourself in a worse financial situation by helping your kids. So that's our show for today. Full show notes, including a transcript and links to some of the stuff we talked about today and how you can track down Vanessa, will be on our website at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.